In Luke 23:34, it reads, "And Jesus said, 'Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.'" How does empathy and understanding impact our ability to forgive? That's what we're going to be getting into in today's video. And I'm even going to share with you all a very vulnerable story from my own life of really having to put this into practice. And let me tell you, okay, I did not want to release this person. I did not want to let it go. I didn't think that it was right. I didn't think that it was fair. I thought they should have known better. But understanding really helped me. And today, I'm free from that situation. That relationship with that person continues to thrive. And I'm grateful for having walked through this and to be able to share it with you all today. So if you're listening to this episode, watching this video, and not in our Facebook community, honey, what are you doing? Okay. We get into the deep topics over there in the Facebook group, and you need like-minded Christians around you who will weep with you, who will rejoice with you. So head on over to Facebook and you can search for Radical Christian Community in groups and come join us. You'll get some amazing questions to ponder that will help you to reflect and introspect. There's over 100 men and women in different states with all kinds of testimonies. So there's sure to be someone who can relate to you and journey with you. I hope to see you there. So let's get into the story, right? So the family dynamic that I grew up in was me, my mom, and my stepdad. But because my parents met when they were teenagers, their late teens, they had grown up as friends, but got romantically involved late teens. When my mom was pregnant with me and they got married when I was really young. My stepdad is my dad. And even now that they're divorced, like if you ever hear me refer to my dad, I'm talking about my stepdad. And so with that, I was told who my biological dad was growing up. And it was always kind of weird to me that he didn't want to be involved in my life because like we literally lived across the street from his mom. And so it was kind of like, I know you coming to visit your mama. Like, I'm literally right across the street. It's just weird. And then like I had relationships with his sisters and other people in his family, cousins on that side. And so it was just weird. Like, I don't understand why he wouldn't want to be there, you know? And so that was kind of like always in the back of my mind, but I wouldn't like really harp on it because I had a dad. And so it wasn't like I was yearning for that father figure in my life because I had that. It was just kind of weird to me, you know, with him having so much access to me that he wouldn't take advantage of that and want to form a relationship. And so it just was always kind of like, I wonder why not, you know? And so then one day, all of a sudden, someone brings up in conversation that he's not my biological dad. And it's like, skirt, skirt. Okay. Skirt, skirt, skirt. And so it was real ghetto. Okay. The way that it came about, honestly, growing up in the country, if you know, you know, if you grew up in the country. And so I brought it up to my mom, and I remember her just kind of like shooting it down, not really entertaining the conversation, getting upset about it, addressing it with the person who brought it up, all of these things. And I'm just like, that's cool, but like, I'm sure they didn't make this up out of nowhere. Like, I don't understand how there could be no truth in this at all, because like, why would somebody just make that up? So as a kid, or at this time, it was like early teens, I was legit curious. Y'all know how little kids just ask a ton of questions because they just curious. I was legit confused. Like, they couldn't have just made this up. Like, who would do that? So I kept pressing because I'm like, why would they lie? 1 + 1 is not equaling 2. Is this mom math? You know? And so eventually she ended up telling the truth, you know, that the person who she had led me to believe was my biological dad my entire life wasn't my biological dad. And we finally came to know the truth and could move down a road towards resolve in that situation. And so cool, get the truth. We start taking some steps to rectify that situation, and life just goes on. So I go on to graduate high school, go to college, graduate college, move to Richmond. And then my mom comes to help move me in, her and my dad, in Richmond, Virginia, when I moved in. And I think we were just like having some heartfelt conversations during that visit. And I just kind of go back to that situation from my teens, and I'm just like, what happened there? And I think that there was a part of me that was still kind of holding on to the fact that, like, you really lied to me my whole life. Help me understand what was going on, because I don't feel like I harped on it, but there was still something in me that was like, you lied like my whole life, And so what it all really came down to was the fact that my mom did what she thought was the best given the situation. And the situation was that she was a 16-year-old. She had found herself pregnant at 15. She was 16 by the time that she had me. And she didn't get pregnant by someone that she saw a future with. And so it was kind of just like, I'ma just buckle down and do what I gotta do now that I've got myself into this situation. And then my dad ended up coming along. And so in that way, it kind of rectified the situation and made everything much better than she even thought that it was gonna be. So there was really no need to, and there was some other things behind the scenes that she explained to me more in depth about how that narrative came to be shaped. That just made me go, okay. And so as I listened to her put me into the perspective of a 15-year-old girl who has found herself pregnant, not intending to, not knowing, how to raise a child, having that weight on your shoulders of that decision, how am I going to make the best now that I've gotten myself into this situation? I have an entire life to steward. She literally did the best that she could with what she had. And so in her mind, especially when my dad came along, like, man, this is actually turning out much better than expected. That don't even matter. In my mind, it was, but you robbed me of something. Kind of like when, with children who are adopted, at some point they may want to search out their biological family, and that's their right, we can't say how much success they're going to have with that, just depending on the lengths that their biological family may go to not be found. But that's their right. There's something in them that may want to long for home, long for their roots and where they came from. So it just kind of felt like that got snatched away from me, and I didn't have any say so in it. I didn't have any no say so, that I wasn't considered at all in that decision. But what it came down to is she simply did the best that she could with what she had, with the cards that she was dealt. And that was honestly all there was to it. And so as I started to hear her story, it was kind of like, well, who am I to assume that I would have made a different decision at 15? Who am I to think that if I was dealt the same cards that I would have made the quote unquote best decision? I can say that in retrospect with the information that I have now, but I can't really say that I would have been any better, or made any better decision with the weight of something like that. And so now that I had that information, it was up to me to choose to either accept that and move forward or continue to hang on to it. And I chose to accept it. I chose to empathize. I chose to allow understanding to play its role. And for that to actually make me go, wow, I have so much deeper insight into my mom now, and build on that foundation now that we're here. And so back to Jesus and his example in the ESV Study Bible, which is the one that I use when I'm putting together these episodes for you all and doing a bit of Bible study. Sorry, I got people outside my window in the community walking with their little kids, super cute. So in the ESV Study Bible, the footnotes mention how in asking for forgiveness for these people that Jesus modeled his own teaching of loving our enemies. And when I saw that, I wanted to unpack that a little bit, because I'm like, well, who are our enemies? That word always felt like such a strong word to me. Like, maybe there's people that don't like me and people that I don't like, but enemies? Like, that feels like a lot. So I wanted to offer up just this alternate definition, a simple definition of what an enemy is. And that definition really being one who is opposing you. That's it. An enemy is somebody who opposes you. So that opens things up a bit, right? Because that can look a lot of different ways. That can look like a person whose beliefs are opposite from you. That person is opposing you. It can look like the person who is opposing you by wounding you emotionally. You're opposing me. You're hurting me. You're inflicting damage. It can look like the person you're in conflict with. We're on opposite sides of how we view something. There's tension between us, so there's opposition. And so then, said another way, we're instructed to love those who oppose us. Okay then, so what is love? And I know y'all know this, 1 Corinthians, right? Love is patient, it's kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it's not arrogant, it's not rude, it does not insist on its own way, it's not irritable or resentful. Hello somebody. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So endure all things from someone who is opposing me. Be hopeful even with someone who is opposing me. Don't be resentful with somebody who is opposing me, huh? Upside down kingdom, right? And so Jesus literally looks up before he takes his last breath and he asks God to forgive the people who hurt him because they simply do not understand what they're doing. And here's the hard truth. Here it is. We don't want to release people even if they simply didn't understand. Forget the fact that your parents never had a good example themselves because they hurt you and that's all that matters. Forget the fact that the ex never had someone to truly show them love. It don't matter, right? Because of how they made you feel. Forget the fact that the friend only gave you what they had received. Never mind all that because they hurt you. And we're not talking about how you've hurt people, how I've hurt people, because we have a tendency to focus on how we're the ones that have been hurt. We just spend so much time focusing on everybody else. But there are times when we've been the culprit too, right? And I know it's hard because people need to be held accountable. And oftentimes boundaries are absolutely necessary. Oftentimes relational adjustments are necessary even for your emotional and sometimes physical protection. So this is a both and. Right? You can set a boundary and forgive them, sis. Both things can exist at the same time. Setting a boundary is not bitterness. Setting a boundary is in wisdom, right? I remember the day when I finally realized that my ex-husband had nothing more to give me. And in a strange way, it was kind of freeing because it was like, oh, well, of course, this is where we're going to end up because you don't have anything more to give. Understanding is what freed me and allowed me to release him. Did it still hurt? Absolutely. Because why you get married with only 4 years in the gas tank, right? When you signed up for a lifelong trip. That's not fair to me. But once we ran out of gas and there was not a decision to refuel, there was not a decision to do the thing that was necessary to keep going, well, I felt like, okay, well, the Lord is coming to pick me up and give me a ride because where are we going? All right. And I would propose the same thing to you, that the Lord wants to pick you up and he wants to give you a ride, but you refuse to get out the car. Baby, the car ain't got no more gas in it, sis. It's time to refuel. It's time to change cars. It's time to switch gears. It's time to do something different, but you don't want to let go. You want to keep having the same conversation over and over when they already told you what it is. You want to keep revisiting it after they already apologized, or maybe they didn't, and you know you're not going to get the apology, but you still refuse to let it go. And refusing to let it go can also look like not doing the work. Let's get into it. Refusing to let it go can look like not being intentional and working through it because you don't want to face the pain, because you don't want to reflect on what was done for you, because you ain't got time. I get it. We were just talking about that in the Facebook group, right? But it's necessary because the only thing that you control is you. So you are in control of how you choose to move forward and the type of work that you choose to put in. You can't control what they do, but you can control how you respond to it. Now, in looking at this passage, the ESV Study Bible also points out how Jesus The fact that Jesus stated that they didn't know what they were doing didn't remove the responsibility. They were still responsible for their own actions. It didn't mean that their hands were clean. The blood was still on their hands, but it literally just speaks to the lack of understanding. They didn't truly know that they were crucifying the real Messiah. They were operating under a different understanding. They thought that he was a fraud. They thought that he was a fake. They didn't believe that he was the Messiah and choose to crucify him. They were operating under a different thought pattern. And that's why it's important to get understanding, because sometimes people are just operating with a different thought pattern. That's the importance of effective communication. Even if you're trying to communicate about a thing, are you getting over to the message across to them that you thought that you were getting across to them? Because if not, that's not effective communication. You may be communicating, but it's not effective because your message isn't landing in the way that you intended, right? Again, why understanding is important. Aaron and I talk about this a lot in our own modes of communication, because he's a strong communicator. And because of some of the ways that I grew up, you start coming at me strong, I'm like, no, sir. Back up, shut down, end of conversation, talk to me when you got some sense, you know. But again, he has to understand why I shut down if he's coming at me strong, and I'll have to understand why he's coming at me strong and what it doesn't mean when he's coming at me strong, as opposed to what I think that it means. So if there's someone in your life that you are struggling to embrace or forgive, I really encourage you to reflect on this a bit. Might there be something about their current level of understanding or their mode of operation that would cause them to behave in this way, in the way that they have? And maybe it's not personal. Maybe their behavior says more about them than it does about you. Perhaps it's honestly not about you at all, but you're just unfortunately on the other end of their ignorance, you know, and you're impacted by their actions, but it's really not about you, it's about them. Spend some time with these possibilities in your time with God, and just sit with the Holy Spirit and see what he would impress upon your heart for your personal situation, and then how he would be calling you to move forward. And per usual, I'm here if you need to process, if you need to word vomit, if you need help getting clarity on what the Spirit might be speaking concerning this situation. You can head on over to aradicalrelationship.com/forgiveness coaching to learn more about how coaching works and take that next step towards freedom. Until next time, folks, I'm out. Bye, y'all.